Hello everyone. Today I will continue telling you the story about the poor girl named Tu Sam. I hope you enjoy the video. From the moment the doctor announced that Tu Sam had passed the critical stage, Officer Lee felt no relief at all. On the contrary, a cold fury rose sharply inside him. Looking at her pale face through the glass of the recovery room, he knew this accident was absolutely not a coincidence, and he would never let it fade into silence. Lee stood there for long minutes, his hands clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white. His heart tightened when he remembered that stormy night years ago, when she had run toward him and pushed him out of the path of a skidding car, saving him from certain death. She once saved his life, and now it was his turn to protect her, no matter the cost. Early the next morning, without even eating, Lee returned to the crash scene. Tire marks were still streaked across the road, forming a strange trajectory, like the rider had deliberately accelerated without ever touching the brakes. He crouched down, examining every detail, lips pressed into a thin line as unease continued to grow. When he checked the nearby traffic cameras, he discovered a motorbike trailing behind Tu Sam and Bitch from earlier, keeping just enough distance to avoid suspicion. A sharp question echoed in his mind. Someone orchestrated this, and that person was close to Tu Sam. When he returned to the hospital and stood beside her bed, looking at the fragile girl who had always endured everything and never once knew how to protect herself, Lee gently adjusted her blanket. His voice lowered, slow and steady but heavy with resolve. He whispered that she could sleep peacefully, that he would find whoever hurt her. No matter who they were, no matter where they hid, he would not let them live comfortably. It was a vow spoken quietly, as if he wanted to carve it directly into his heart. From that moment onward, Lee began an unofficial investigation, one far more intense and determined than any case he had ever handled. He tracked down the rider who caused the crash, checked phone records of those involved, reviewed every camera along the route Bitch had taken with Tu Sam, and questioned every local resident in the area. Every small clue was carefully recorded, pieced together into a blurry but unmistakably sinister picture. He refused to let justice be twisted, and he would never allow that gentle girl to suffer even more injustice. His quiet worry gradually turned into a burning fire. The deeper he dug, the more his suspicions solidified. Everything became clearer the day Tu Sam's father came to the station, hands trembling, voice choking, and confessed everything he overheard. Bitch's plot, the group stalking her, the deliberate shove that pushed Tu Sam right into the path of the speeding motorbike. Lee froze as he listened. His face darkened like the sky before a storm, not because he was surprised but because the truth was even crueler than he expected. He slammed the file down on the desk, eyes blazing. Bitch hadn't just hurt her own sister, she had attempted murder. This was no accident. This was a crime. And Lee knew with absolute certainty that it was his duty to bring everything into the light. It was no longer just a mission, it was justice, responsibility, and his promise to the girl lying in that hospital room. No matter how complicated the case became, no matter how well the culprit tried to hide, Officer Lee would dig until the truth surfaced. He understood deeply that someone who once saved him with her own life deserved to be protected with everything he had. And for that reason he stepped into this fight not only as a police officer, but as a man who refused to let the woman he cared for suffer any more injustice. The hospital room was thick with the smell of antiseptic. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting soft warm streaks across the wall. Tu Sam lay there, breathing lightly, her face still pale after the life-threatening ordeal. Time seemed to move slowly, as if afraid to hurt her any further. Beside the bed, Lee had been sitting for hours. He leaned against the chair, head resting on the edge of the bed, his hand holding hers tightly. Dark circles shaded his eyes after many sleepless nights, but his shoulders remained tense, ready to spring up at the slightest sound to protect her. Near noon, Tu Sam's eyelashes trembled. She tried to open her eyes, but her lids felt as heavy as stone. Only on the second attempt did they finally part, blinking weakly as her senses slowly returned. The first thing she saw was the dark crown of Lee's head right beside her. He was still asleep, breathing slowly, his hand gripping hers as if afraid she might disappear. Tu Sam moved slightly, a thin whisper escaping her cracked lips. "Ang, Lee." The sound was so soft it was barely more than a breath, but Lee jerked awake immediately. He shot upright, panic flashing in his eyes before he realized she was conscious. In that moment, his eyes turned red, and the flicker of relief and overwhelming emotion nearly broke him. You're awake. His voice trembled, a rare thing for someone like him. Sam tried to move, but pain shot through her body, so she only managed to turn her head toward him. Her eyes were tired, but somewhere deep inside them was a quiet peace, because he was there. Why are you sitting here? She whispered, as though afraid she was troubling him. Lee didn't answer right away. He lowered his head, tightening his hold on her hand. His fingers were cold, but his grip was firm, protective. For a long moment she thought he wouldn't reply. Then he finally spoke, voice low and painfully sincere. Because I have to be here. I can't leave you alone. I'm afraid that if I step away, something will happen to you again. Sam stared at him. Her eyes stung. Her throat tightened with emotion she didn't know how to name. She once believed she wasn't important to anyone. That if something happened to her, the world would keep turning just the same. But now this man was here. For her. She tilted her head slightly, her voice faint but full of truth. I'm okay now, don't worry. Lee pressed his lips together. His eyes reddened again, but he forced his voice to stay calm. You're okay because I reached you in time. But I won't allow anyone to hurt you again. I promise from now on I'll protect you. Sam blinked, her lashes damp with emotion. She couldn't speak. All she could do was gently tighten her weak fingers around his hand, the first time she had ever reached for him on her own. The small gesture stunned Lee for a second. Then his eyes softened completely, as though every storm inside him had just died out, leaving only the tenderness that only she had ever seen. Yeah, I'm right here. And I'm not going anywhere. In that quiet white hospital room, there was no need for grand vows or dramatic speeches. One look, one intertwined hand was enough to say that. From this moment on, both their lives had changed forever. The afternoon in the hospital room was as still as unmoving water. The heart monitor beeped steadily, and the soft sunlight filtering through the window made Sam's face look fragile, yet somehow livelier than when she first woke up. Lee sat beside the bed, still holding her hand. He hadn't let go for even half a second since the moment she opened her eyes. Seeing that she was more alert, he stood up to pour her a cup of warm water, gently helping her sit upright to drink it. Watching his every movement, her heart softened. She felt grateful, and strangely unfamiliar with being cared for so tenderly. When she set the cup down, Sam asked quietly, her voice still weak but her eyes serious. Officer Lee, that day, was it really an accident? Lee fell silent for a few seconds. His face tensed, his jaw tightening. He pulled the chair closer and sat down, as if preparing to say something important. No, he said slowly, clearly, enunciating each word. It wasn't an accident. Sam's heart skipped a beat. She gripped the edge of the blanket, a wave of fear rising along her spine. But she forced herself to ask, then what was it? Lee looked straight into her eyes, an unshielded deep gaze, like a truth he refused to hide any longer. Someone wanted you hurt. I checked the cameras around the area. There was a motorbike tailing you and bitch from earlier, not leaving your side. When you reached that stretch of road, the driver suddenly sped up abnormally, and right at that moment, you were pushed into the street. Sam's face drained of color. Her breathing turned uneven, her eyes widening in disbelief. She remembered the moment clearly, but she never imagined there was something so terrifying behind it. Pushed? She whispered. Lee nodded, his voice dropping. I can't confirm who's behind it yet, but I'm certain of one thing. You didn't fall because you slipped. Someone deliberately pushed you at the exact moment that bike rushed in. Sam trembled. She lowered her head, her weak hands clasping each other. Pain spread through her chest. Not just physical pain, but something deeper, sharper. The first person she thought of was the younger sister she always endured. Lee saw everything. He knew exactly what she was thinking. He sighed and leaned forward, his tone gentle but firm. I know you don't want to believe it, but I can't let you face danger again. I need you to know the truth. This cannot be treated as an accident. Sam pressed her lips together, her eyes filling with tears. She tried to stay strong, but her voice shook. If that's true, then why? What did I do wrong? Lee felt his chest tighten at her question. He reached out and placed his hand over hers, his voice low and full of protection. It's not your fault. You've never done anything wrong. The fault lies with those who don't know how to cherish you. She lowered her head, her tears falling onto the back of his hand, but Lee didn't pull away. He held her tighter as if trying to give her strength. After a few minutes of heavy silence, Sam finally looked up, asking the question she feared most. Then what will you do now? Lee stared at her for a long moment. His eyes no longer carried only the responsibility of a police officer. There was determination, anger, sorrow on her behalf, and something deeper that she could feel but couldn't name. I'll investigate to the end, he said firmly, every word like carved stone. Whoever is behind this, even if they are your family or someone else's, I will bring the truth to light. No one will be allowed to hurt you a second time. Sam looked at him teary-eyed, but with a faint warmth shining through. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel completely alone. There was someone standing on her side, someone fighting for her. Officer Lee, she whispered, her voice choked but sincere. Thank you. Lee gently squeezed her hand, his gaze softening. Don't thank me. This is something I have to do. In that bright hospital room within Sam's fragile but warm breaths, Lee's promise echoed like a lifeline. A ray of light cutting through the darkness enveloping her life. From that moment on, the truth began to surface, and Sam's battle for justice had officially begun. 3 days after Sam regained consciousness, Lee stayed at the hospital day and night, only leaving briefly to return to the station to search for more clues. He was nearly exhausted, but he refused to stop. The deeper he dug, the more shadows he uncovered, and that only strengthened his resolve. But that very resolve triggered a storm he did not expect. That afternoon, just as Lee placed the case files on his desk, his department chief walked in. The man, Lee's direct superior, rarely wore such a heavy expression. He shut the door, locking it, plunging the room into a suffocating tension. Lee, he said, voice low enough to raise every alarm inside Lee. I need to speak with you privately. Lee straightened. What is it, sir? The chief placed a file on the table and slid it toward him. Inside were familiar documents, the preliminary conclusion of Sam's accident, and on top was a notice, a suspension order. Lee frowned, then looked up sharply, eyes like blades. Why is the investigation being halted? The chief sighed, removed his glasses and rubbed his brow. Because we can't dig deeper. Can't. Lee's voice hardened. Or not allowed to. The older man held his gaze for several seconds before answering slowly, as if choosing his words carefully. Someone from above gave the order. They said it was just an accident. No further investigation is needed. Lee gritted his teeth. His voice dropped to a deadly low. You know this wasn't an accident. I know. The chief replied immediately, his voice heavy. But I can't disobey a direct order. And neither can you. Lee stepped forward, eyes blazing. She almost died. Someone tried to kill her. We cannot. Lee. The chief cut him off with a stern whisper. Who do you think you are to fight an entire system alone? I'm telling you the truth, the people above really want you to stop. If you keep going, you will be dismissed. Silence fell like a weight. It felt like ice water had been poured over Lee's head. Dismissed. That meant losing his badge. Losing his authority to investigate. Losing the ability to protect Sam. And the person who harmed her would remain free. Seeing the change in Lee's expression, the chief softened his tone. Lee, I know you want to protect that girl, but sometimes we must accept reality. There are things we simply cannot touch. Lee lowered his gaze, breathing heavy. He said nothing. The chief continued. You're a good officer. Don't let one personal case destroy your career. One personal case. That single sentence made Lee raise his head, his expression full of restrained fury, but eerily calm. You're mistaken, he said coldly. This isn't personal. This is attempted murder. The chief shook his head, gathering the files. You don't have the evidence to prove it. And those above don't want you to find any evidence. Lee's fists clenched so tightly that his nails dug into his skin, but he stayed quiet. The chief walked to the door. Before leaving, he gave one last heavy warning. Lee, listen to me. Stop. You can't win this. The door closed, leaving behind a suffocating silence. Lee stood motionless, as if someone had cut off his breath. Only one truth echoed in his mind. If he stopped now, the truth would be buried. Sam would never receive justice, and his heart would never be at peace. He closed his eyes, inhaling deeply. When he opened them again, they were cold and sharp as steel. Even if I have to give up this badge, he whispered through clenched teeth, his voice filled with unwavering determination. I will find the one who hurt you, Sam. That night, after finishing his shift, Lee didn't go home. He drove out toward the outskirts of the city to an abandoned garage, where he had once received an anonymous tip. The motorbike rider who caused Sam's accident had been seen here. Even though his superiors had ordered him to stop the investigation, Lee couldn't turn his back. He knew very well that if he let go, everything would sink into darkness again, and the person behind it all would hurt someone else, or return for Sam. As the night deepened, the outskirts grew colder and emptier. Streetlights cast weak yellow glows over the pavement. Lee stopped his car in front of the old garage, turned off the engine to avoid attention, and walked in with a small flashlight. The air inside was thick with dust, the smell of old motor oil, and the sound of wind whistling through broken walls. A cold, unsettling atmosphere. He crouched to inspect faint tire tracks on the ground. The markings matched the type of tire used on the motorbike that crashed into Sam. His heartbeat thumped a little faster. He took photos and recorded the evidence. But as he straightened up, a strange sound echoed behind him. Footstep. Soft but unmistakable. Lee turned quickly but saw nothing except darkness. He narrowed his eyes and raised the flashlight. Who's there? No response. He took one step forward when suddenly, a sharp whistle cut through the air, and a long metal bar swung down from above. He reacted fast, twisting his body aside. It slammed into the ground with a violent clang. Two masked men burst out of the shadows. Lee stepped back, landing a powerful punch on the first one. The man staggered, but the second attacker rushed in, swinging a baton. Lee dodged one strike, but the second slammed into his shoulder, sending a wave of pain down his arm. He clenched his teeth and pivoted sharply, kicking one of them hard across the ribs. But the other man kept attacking, aiming the baton directly at his head. Lee blocked with his arm, the impact numbing it instantly. These weren't random thugs. Their movements, precise, trained, told him everything. These were professionals, hired to silence him. Lee managed to land a blow to the stomach of one attacker. But at that moment, a sudden flash of light appeared behind him. A black car. It sped toward him at full force. Lee lunged backward but couldn't dodge entirely. The vehicle clipped his leg, sending him crashing to the ground. Pain exploded from his ankle upward. He tried to rise, but the car screeched, turned, and aimed its headlights straight at him, blinding, white, and murderous. Lee understood instantly. They weren't trying to scare him. They were trying to kill him. He dragged himself behind a large metal container. The car rammed into it, pushing it nearly a meter across the floor. Debris fell everywhere, dust billowing around him. Amid the chaos, a low, chilling voice called out from the car. Stop, Lee. Don't go looking for death. This isn't your business. Lee lifted his head, breathing hard but eyes sharp as knives. You tried to kill a girl, and now you want to silence me too? A cold laugh echoed back. Doesn't matter why. Orders from above say you stop. We just carry them out. Lee tightened his fist, pain shooting through him but resolve unshaken. The car revved, preparing to charge again. But at that very moment, police sirens sounded in the distance. A patrol car passing the main road nearby. The attackers panicked. The masked men scrambled into the car. The black vehicle sped off into the darkness, leaving Lee lying on the dusty ground, chest heaving. He forced himself upright, leg throbbing so much he could barely stand. Cold sweat ran down his back. But in his eyes, the fire of determination burned hotter than ever. If they had gone this far, it meant he was getting close to the truth. Leaning against the wall, breathing raggedly, he pressed his lips into a hard line. In that case, I really can't stop. He gripped his dirt-stained phone, looking at the photo of Sam sleeping peacefully in the hospital. And he knew, For her, he had to continue, no matter how dangerous it became. It was late at night. The hospital was silent except for the steady rhythm of the machines. Sam lay against her pillow, her head still spinning slightly from the injuries. The nurse had just changed her bandages. Her body ached, but none of it compared to the anxiety twisting inside her. Lee hadn't come all day. No messages, no calls, no visits. It had never happened before. A cold dread crept into her heart like a warning of something terrible. She tried to convince herself he was just busy at the station, that he was safe. But her instincts whispered otherwise. Just then the door opened. Not Lee but two young officers, Lee's co-workers. Their faces were grave. Sam felt her chest tighten. Where is Officer Lee?" she asked, her voice trembling. One of the young officers lowered his head, voice thick. "Officer Lee was in an accident." Sam froze. Her breath caught painfully in her throat. "A accident?" she repeated, unable to believe it. The second officer stepped closer, speaking slowly. "He was injured while following a lead. His car went off the road into a ditch. His leg is badly hurt and he took heavy blows to the body, but he's not in critical condition." Sam covered her mouth, stifling a sob. Tears streamed down her cheeks uncontrollably. He got hurt investigating for me, didn't he?" The two officers exchanged glances. They didn't answer. But their silence was the answer. A cold shiver ran down her spine. Her heart felt like it was being crushed. Lee had been hurt. Because of her. Only because of her. She stammered. Where is he now? Is he awake? Is he in pain?" The younger officer shook his head gently. "He's being transferred to the city hospital." "But, Sam, there's something else. The chief warned Officer Lee several times to stop investigating your case. He refused. Now, he might be suspended if he continues." A brutal blow struck her heart. She didn't speak for a long time. So long the officers thought she'd fainted. But finally she lifted her head. Her voice was weak, yet painfully clear. I won't pursue this anymore. Please tell your superiors. I don't want the investigation to continue." The officers stared at her in shock. "Sam, are you sure?" She bit her lip until it bled, tears streaming but her voice steady in a way that hurt even herself. "Yes. I don't want Officer Lee in danger anymore. I don't want him suspended. I don't want anything else to happen to him because of me." She looked up, her tear-filled eyes unwavering. "I've had enough. I can endure it. I don't want him to continue investigating." The officers wanted to object, but they couldn't. They simply nodded and promised to deliver the message. When the door closed, Sam covered her face and cried as if a piece of her heart had been torn away. She knew she was giving up her chance at justice. But in return, Lee would be safe. She gasped for breath, tears soaking the pillow. "I'm sorry, Lee. I don't want you to get hurt because of me." In that cold, lonely room, the fragile girl chose to sacrifice her own justice, just so the man who had protected her could be safe. But what she didn't know was, at that very moment in the city hospital, Officer Lee, who had just woken after a long blackout, had heard the news that she asked to stop the investigation, and he absolutely refused to accept it.
Xin chào mọi người, rất vui được gặp lại mọi người trong video của mình. Chúc mọi người có một ngày mới vui vẻ và hạnh phúc và có một ngày làm việc tràn đầy năng lượng. Mình hy vọng rằng những video của mình sẽ mang đến niềm vui cho mọi người và những câu chuyện mình mang đến cũng có một phần ý nghĩa nhỏ trong cuộc sống mọi người, giúp mọi người hiểu hơn về những người phụ nữ ở Việt Nam. Hiện tại những video của mình đang được phát hành vào khung giờ 7 giờ tối và 7 giờ sáng tại Việt Nam. Mọi người nhớ chú ý đón xem nha. Và mình rất hy vọng là mình có thể nhận được những lời nhận xét, đánh giá của mọi người ở dưới phần bình luận để mình có động lực làm những video mới hay và hấp dẫn hơn. Cảm ơn mọi người đã lắng nghe hết câu chuyện ngày hôm nay. Hy vọng sẽ gặp lại mọi người ở trong những video lần sau. Cảm ơn mọi người và hẹn gặp lại mọi người ở video lần sau nha.